less and less even. At the same time, that make investment in China become much larger, because we know that rich people, their consumption propensity is low. Their saving propensity is high. Poor people, their consumption propensity is high, and their saving propensity is low, but they don't have enough fund for consumption. So that causes a lot of imbalance in China. So I think China should use this opportunity to carry out the reform in the financial sectors in order to create an enabling environment, equal services to all types of enterprises. And small and medium enterprises should be encouraged to develop. And that will create more jobs. At the same time, that can improve the income distribution and also to rebalance the saving and the consumption in China.
There's been a lot of debate about whether, for the last 10 years or so up until the crisis, that the world has been fueled by the US consumer.
Yeah.
Will the next decade be the age of the Chinese consumer? Is that a realistic focus, or is it a fantasy?
Well, I think that, certainly the consumption in China, has some scope to increase. As I mentioned, if you look into the saving in China in the past 10 years, saving was about 45% of GDP. Household saving was 20%. Corporate saving was another 25%. If you compare the household saving, it was similar to India. What difference is in the corporate saving? Okay, so if we can carry out the reform in the format I just described, household income will increase. And then, even with 20% of the saving, or even 25% of saving, 30% of saving, the total consumption in China will increase. So there's some scope for increased consumption in China, for sure. However, it's a developing country. China also needs to continue to make investment in order to increase its capital stock to catch up with the high-income country. So I would say, it's a half bottle of waters. Compared to the past, then the water will be filled, but it cannot be the full bottle for consumption. If China only consume and would not make investment as in the US, then the income in China cannot increase.
Justin, there's a lot of debate about the economic impact in China and the social impact. Obviously, the Chinese government is very focused on social stability.
Yeah.
If you're a policymaker now back in Beijing, would you be more worried about the 20 million workers who've lost jobs in factories, or would you be more worried about students unable to find jobs over the next 6 months?
Well, we'll worry both.
You'd worry about that.
But the issue is that, we need to introduce social security system to provide enough support to the low-income people, enough support to the people who lose their job. At the same time, the government should restructure the economy, allow the small and medium-sized enterprises to grow, and they can create more jobs. And they also can attract young, talented people to go into the startup and so on. So I think the government certainly should do everything to address all these issues.
But particularly over the next 6 months, where you have more displacement, perhaps a little less job creation, which is the more worrying area, politically speaking?
Politically, I wouldn't say which one should be given less attention. But certainly, the way to address the issue might be different. Because those migrant workers, mostly they return to the countryside. And how to help them? The Chinese government now have a very ingenious program. They issue voucher to those return migrants. And the return migrants can use this voucher to select training programs to enhance their human capital. And so they can find a better job in the future. For the students, the government, have program. One is to enlarge the civil services. In the past few years, because of the rural and urban disparities, and we don't see so many young people who are willing to go to the countryside. And now the Chinese government certainly has the intention to narrow the rural-urban gap. And one way is to provide some kind of attractive program for young people to serve in the rural area for a few years. And then they can come back to the urban areas. And that is one policy. And the other one, as you know, that China recently adopted this new healthcare programs. And it will create a more sophisticated and extensive healthcare system in the rural areas, and which will provide a lot of job opportunities. So the way to solve the problem would be different. But I think for the government, they need to pay attention to both sides.
Speaking of healthcare, I mean, obviously we're at a very early stage of a swine flu epidemic, pandemic, call it what you will. Have you already started modelling what impact that might have on global growth over the 12 months if the current pattern and dispersal of infection continues?
We watch this very carefully, closely, and we have the ability to make assessment of how large will be the impact. But we need to wait a few weeks to come before all the parameters is clear to be able to assess how large the impact will be.
What's your instinct about it?
I think that, well, my instinct is that hopefully it's smaller, the better.
That may be your heart as much as your instinct. The figures on US GDP first quarter. Some people said 6.1% contraction was a great figure.
Yeah.
Was it a good figure? Some people focused on inventory reduction and so on and so on.
Yeah.
But it must be the first time in history that somebody said 6.1% contraction is a good figure.
Well, that's compared to what? Right, they may expect to have 8% contraction and now only 6.1, so it's not too bad in that sense.
But when you looked at that figure, what did you see?
I think the figure then it confirmed my hypothesis. The demand drops and the firm production reduced. Investment opportunity reduced, or investment also decline. And so that means the excess capacity will be there. And if the excess capacity is there, there's a danger for downward deflationary spiral. And so the government need to come up with some kind of policy to cope with that.
A few weeks ago, just ahead of the G20 meeting, Joshua Chuan, the governor of the People's Bank, said that the world needs a reserve currency. That implying, I guess, the dollar's role was changing, and a new one. Is that a realistic proposition?
I think that has been an issue since the Bretton Woods system was established, even before that. You know that the Joshua Chuan's idea actually followed Keynes' ideas of Banco, right? That's international reserve currencies. It's not individual countries' currencies. But after the Bretton Woods system was built, established, US dollar took the position as an international reserve currencies. I think that at that time to use US dollar as international reserve currency, there's some advantage, it's there. And also US economy was more than 50% of the global economy at that time. So use US dollars as a reserve currency is very convenient, and everyone accepts that. But to use national currency as a reserve currency has its advantage and disadvantage. Advantage, as I mentioned, is very convenient. You do not need to have another authority to issue the currency, to monitor, and so on. But the disadvantage, both for the reserve currency